Hello, it is I, Anthony Velez, your instructor. You should be familiar with that at this point in the class. Here we are on the transition from wrapping up week 5 and moving to week 6. I might look a little different because I am now wearing a collar. As I mentioned in an email recently, I have been ordained as a deacon in the Anglican Church as I move towards the pastorate or priesthood. And so now being clergy, well, this is part of my official wardrobe. What I want to do here basically is provide a review of the past 5 weeks. And kind of a preview of week 6 as we move into week 6, and to kind of set you up for the signature assignment, because I thought it would be a good idea to review some of the key ideas and dominant themes of this course in relation to Jesus' ministry and identity. By the way, the signature assignment that I just mentioned is due July 8th, so next Sunday, not this Sunday, day after tomorrow, but the following Sunday is July 5th, and then 3 days after that, July 8th, is when the signature assignment will be due, just in case there were people out there who were uncertain. I hope I provided certainty now. So let's begin. Going back to week 1, we looked at the introduction, and you all were introduced at the guiding question for this class, which is essentially, who is Jesus? That basic question was put in 2 forms: who do you say he is, and who do they say he is? And you dealt with that in different ways throughout this class, beginning with that personal essay that you first introduced during that first week. I would say that revealing who Jesus is was an integral part of his ministry. We come to understand his deeds and his teachings in light of his identity, and we come to understand his identity in light of his teaching and deeds, so they kind of mutually feed one another. What Jesus reveals at the end of it all is God. He reveals the nature of God, the face of God, the heart of God, the purpose and will of God. But not only does Jesus, as the Son of God, reveal God, he also reveals true humanity, what God's design and plan was for humanity all along. So Jesus not only reveals God, he reveals true humanity. Along with this, we understand in the context of Israel's history and its ongoing relationship with Yahweh through the covenants, that Jesus is the greater son of David, which is to say he is the Messiah, the anointed one, who came to bring the kingdom. And what that kingdom is all about is something that you explored over the following weeks after week 1. So this now brings us to week 2, Jesus' baptism, temptation, and mighty deeds. These were dominant themes for that week, and they were also the 2 or 3 major assignments for that week in the worksheets that you had in the syllabus. So I would say the thing that connects all of these together is the principle of substitution and identification. And what I mean by that, let me unpack that with you through these different assignments that you did. Through baptism, Jesus identifies with exiled Israel and lost humanity. So God creates Adam. God's plan through Adam goes astray because Adam does not obey. And then God begins to select a people in the aftermath of Adam's misdeed, the fall. And all creation is now subject to sin and death. So God selects a people through Abraham. Those people become the nation of Israel, and it's God's plan through the nation of Israel to bring God's blessing, which would renew all of creation and set it back to order and God's original design. But Israel did not obey God's plan. So Israel is exiled and all of creation is lost. And so Jesus identifies through baptism with John at the Jordan River, is baptized. So he identifies through John's baptism with exiled Israel and lost humanity, which is to say that he takes the plight of Israel and lost humanity upon himself. And then we see in the temptation worksheet that Jesus goes out into the wilderness in the power of the Spirit. If you remember, when he was baptized, the Spirit came upon him and remained, and the Spirit led him out into the temptation, out into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And in many ways what that does is it reverses where humanity went wrong. Just as humanity through Adam faced the devil in the garden and failed, now in the aftermath of the garden, the wilderness, Jesus, the new Adam, goes out into the wilderness to face the devil, and he prevails. And so that's kind of how you see the identification with Jesus in humanity through the temptation. And then finally, in the wonders and mighty deeds, the way that connects to the fate of humanity, if you go all the way back to Genesis, God creates humanity in his image, and he says to those humans created in his image, male and female, Adam and Eve, be fruitful, multiply, and exercise dominion over the earth. So God endowed humanity with authority to exercise dominion. And what you see Jesus doing in his mighty deeds and miracles is exercising that dominion, walking on water, causing nature to obey his will, restoring the broken creation by restoring sight to the blind and hearing to the deaf, and restoring the ability to move to those who are lame. And so all those are signs that the new creation has come through Jesus' ministry. The restoration of creation has come through Jesus' ministry. And that's connected to God's will, that humans exercise dominion over creation, which is to bring creation to higher levels of development and creativity with the gifts and faculties that he endowed all of us with. So again, in week 2, you have this kind of principle of substitution, Jesus standing in our behalf, and identification, Jesus identifying with us. And as you'll see, actually, later we get a chance to identify with him, but I'll approach that in a few moments. In week 3, Jesus the teacher with authority. As Matthew is so clearly clear to record, Jesus does not teach like the others, but as one who has his own authority. Now, we could say that Jesus has this authority because he is the Son of God, and so there is an innate authority he has by virtue of his divinity, which on some level is true. But also I think there's another way to look at this, a way that more aligns with the biblical narrative, particularly as we see it in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it's that Jesus has an authority because he walked the way of service to the cross. And by doing that, he obtained a redeeming authority. So now his authority, this power that he had by virtue of being the Son of God to make creation, enables him to remake and redeem creation, the way of service and the cross. And so this allows him to exercise that authority in such a way that he can rework us, redeem us from the inside out. So what you see in Jesus' teachings and deeds, or what the people in the scriptures experience in Jesus' teachings and deeds, is the reality of the kingdom coming into their midst, crashing upon them, as I like to say. And this kingdom is a redeeming reality that's being made available through Jesus' ministry as a teacher and as a healer. This leads very naturally into week 4, which is Jesus the suffering servant. As I just stated, Jesus not only wields authority, but he wields a redeeming authority, and this is intimately connected to his work as the suffering servant. He was a conquering Messiah, the conquering Messiah, but the problem is he did not conquer in the way that the Jews wanted him to. He conquered through self-service and sacrifice, or you could say self-sacrificial service, by which he went to the broken and rebellious core of creation to bring new life, conversion, and healing to all of us and to all of creation. And this is not what Israel wanted. What they wanted was a conquering Messiah in the manner of Jesus' great-great-great-grandfather, David, who wielded a sword and conquered Israel's enemies throughout Canaan and established a golden age for Israel under that form of military leadership. But Jesus, in his own way, as a servant who laid down his life on behalf of others, conquered lost and rebellious humanity and overthrew the powers and principalities that held creation in bondage up to that time. And so what Jesus did, and the reason why there's a conflict between Jesus and the authorities of his day and age, is that he stood against the prevailing concept of the Messiah as that warrior conqueror that you see in David. His ministry was at odds with the religious and political powers of his day, and it set him on a crash course, which led ultimately to the cross. And this cross looked like a failure, but we, through the eyes of faith, know that Jesus has been resurrected. He's at the right hand of the Father. And so the cross was actually the pathway of his victory. And as disciples, it now becomes a pathway of our victory as we lay down his life and rely upon his grace to renew us. So through the cross, God obtained victory over the powers and principalities that held humanity and all creation captive. God dethroned those powers over our lives, and now the power of Jesus can rule over us to redeem us. One of my favorite authors, N.T. Wright, he's a biblical scholar. He's also a bishop in the Church of England, in which I am ordained. He once referred to the Gospels as enthronement narratives. And the way he likes to present is that Jesus was enthroned upon the kingdom through the cross. So in many ways, the cross is the throne of Jesus Christ. Week 5, the week that you just finished, is the week in which the Christian community begins. So the Holy Spirit that fell upon Jesus at baptism and empowered his kingdom ministry is the same Spirit that Jesus pours out upon us through baptism. And so we get to identify back with Christ. Just as Jesus identified with us in his baptism at the Jordan River, when we are now baptized, we identify with him. We identify with his mission in the world. And very fortunately, we identify with his resurrection, through which we are glorified and raised beyond the powers of death, beyond the power of sin and the principalities that enslave us. So that's the power of identification working both ways. Jesus identifying with us, we identifying with him, all through the waters of baptism. So the Spirit that empowered Jesus now empowers the church to continue the ministry of Jesus on the earth under his lordship. And so the way I like to look at this is that Jesus went to the lowest place, but now sits at the highest place. And therefore there is not a place that he cannot exercise his authority to work the Father's will to redeem creation. And then you're about ready to launch into week 6. This is about how we in the church today carry out Jesus' ministry in a way that is faithful to his mission and yet responsive to the unique issues and elements of our day. To put it in Fee's language, the book that you've been reading, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth, to put it in Fee's language, this is the hermeneutical task of the church, the task of fully translating Jesus' message and ministry into the dynamics of our present culture. And really, this is what the signature assignment is all about. I'm coming up on 12 minutes now, and so I want to wrap this up. I hope this helps, this review, and I look forward to continuing to interact with you, sending you emails, reading your forums, and ultimately reading those signature assignments. God bless you, and goodbye.